Today's video is a little bit longer, but there's a lot to cover. I'd like to talk about the stereotype of the hillbilly and how that has just plagued the East Tennessee people throughout its history, from branding to TV shows, which I find highly offensive. This stereotype really dates all the way back to before Tennessee was a state, with the lost state of Franklin. Now, the lost state of Franklin was comprised by gentlemen in Northeast Tennessee because they really didn't feel they were getting any representation in North Carolina Council. They were on the other side of the mountain, and they were just like, you know what? We need to have some government to deal with things on our own. And they went about it the way they thought they should. They followed the rules, but then North Carolina really did not appreciate this and kind of freaked out on them. North Carolina realized that they were losing this subset of population and land, while the gentlemen in this cabin you're seeing today were forming the lost state of Franklin as it's known today on the other side of the mountains, all the way to the coast in New Bern, North Carolina, where the governor of North Carolina lived in Tryon Palace. They started a smear campaign of really saying, these backwoods idiots, how dare they think that they can leave the state of North Carolina. And this is really where we start to see the hillbilly or the backwards idea for the people in East Tennessee begin. And that's even before the 1792 start of the state of Tennessee. This backwards, uneducated viewpoint from the outside of the Smokies looking in continues, and I would like to connect this to the founding of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in the 1930s, and why the interpretation in the park today is extremely problematic to me as a historian who knows the true history of the people of the Smoky Mountains. I do want to make very clear that I do love the Smoky Mountains National Park, and I'm very glad that it exists today. But even from the dedication, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt came and dedicated the park's creation was not only for preserving the land, but it had a huge marketability to the surrounding area and for tourism. There's no way around that. And unfortunately, when the park was founded and in the midst of the Depression, really, there was a lot of misconception about what was important and what wasn't. Now, even in areas that are heavily visited, like Cades Cove you see here today, what you're seeing today does not represent the way that Cades Cove looked in the 1930s. This is a government man-made reinterpretation of the valley, and they only saved the items which they thought helped market this backwards mountain idea. They had no interest in preserving the state-of-the-art schools, model farms, the accessibility and phone systems that were there. There was a lot of life in the mountains which was erased. Even some of the log cabins that you see in Cades Cove today had large modern Victorian homes on the front, which were removed when the park system took over so that they could perpetuate this idea of the backwards, isolated mountain person. No site is more guilty of this than the Mountain Farm Museum outside of Cherokee, North Carolina. It's part of a visitor center, and the only thing that's original to this site is a large barn. Everything else has been piecemealed. One piece from here, one piece from there, one cabin from one farm, a apple barn from another, and they've all just kind of been plopped down behind this visitor center to create what the Smoky Mountains National Park System felt was the accurate representation for a farm in the Smoky Mountains. Now, this is problematic to me. This was not an original farm setting. This was not the house that was here. They tore that house down because it was too modern. So this is a really just make-believe world that has been created and has been marketed by the National Park System to overshadow the fact that they took hundreds of farms and there was no fighting it. The Smoky Mountains National Park actually sets the precedence in the state of Tennessee for the government having the right to eminent domain property. And this was actually a case in Cades Cove. And this was a big experiment in the late 1920s, early 1930s when they started doing this. And in my opinion, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, while it is wonderful, was the prerequisite testing grounds for TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority's later activities and taking hundreds of thousands of farms in the valley to create hydroelectric power dams. Now, the thing that bothers me the most about this farm is that it sets rather uncared for their collections out in the weather, and there's no interpretation on the site whatsoever anytime that I've been there. They do have special events. I'm sure COVID has impacted this, but as far as it being a living history farm or representing any kind of farm life whatsoever, it really misses the bar altogether on that. Now, it is wonderful that these few sites or these few pieces were saved and moved to this property, because if they hadn't been moved, they would have also been torn down and burnt like the rest of the homesteads in the Smoky Mountains National Park area. This barn, as I said before, was the only thing that was on this site. Everything else was brought here to create the illusion of a mountain farm that you are seeing when you visit there today. Now, I know this may sound like a bit of a rant, but being a native East Tennessean, my family's been here since before the state was a state, and they settled in the Smoky Mountains. They were displaced by this park. They moved to the valley. They were displaced by TVA. And to only have East Tennessee largely be known for its Appalachian backwards hillbilly motif is vexing to me. When you visit Cades Cove, the large majority of what you see left is churches, because that's the one thing that the mountain people were not willing to give on. And there's many people who point out the fact that even when the Smoky Mountains National Park was taking the time and effort to record the histories, they were specifically seeking out the more, lack of a better term, white trash hillbilly idea like people, and ignoring the mainstream mountain people who were going to church on Sunday and not moonshining. And even today, when you go up to Smoky Mountains through Sevierville, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, you still see this huge marketing boom from people generally from the outside area with moonshine stills and moonshine tastings and hillbilly golf. And we just can't seem to ever get past this. This idea of backwards East Tennessee people has been around since the 1770s, 1780s, and it's just time to let that go. And I would really like to see the Smoky Mountains National Park acknowledge the fact that these places are invented. These historic sites that they market to millions of people have been an amalgamation of a few people's ideas of what life in the Smoky Mountains was like, completely ignoring most of the people who were here. And even the people who are natives tend to romanticize the past and romanticize these log cabins and the idea that everybody was backwards and uneducated. And I think that's really problematic for growth in the area and in the Smoky Mountains culture as a whole. So that's why I wanted to bring this topic up. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will stop rattling and just let the rest of the video be some pretty pictures of the mountains. I do want to make very clear, I'm very glad that the Great Smoky Mountains National Park exists today. I just wish they would be a little bit more accountable for the true history of the creation of the site and for their lack of respect for the actual mountain culture. And I hope that if you visit the Smoky Mountains, this video makes you a little bit more aware that everything is not as it seems in the Smoky Mountains with the historic sites. So thank you guys, and let me know what your thoughts are on this. I would really like to know. I know this is a longer video than what I normally do, but it was not an easy topic to cover. So remember to like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Thanks, guys. Bye.